We're delighted to have everybody here launching this debate season in which we're trying to track the presidential election campaign with various topics. And we begin every debate by bringing to the stage the chairman of Intelligence Squared US, who brought this program to New York and to the United States. We're now at debate number 120 and something. We've been doing it for quite a while, and that's because Bob Rosenkranz had the vision to do that. 124. I have a thing in my ear where people tell me what to say, and somebody just said 124. Normally what they're saying is, say smarter stuff, John. Get smarter. This time I just heard 124. I want to bring to the stage then Bob Rosenkranz. What we usually do is chat about why we've picked the particular topics we have. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Rosenkranz. Hi, Bob. Hey, Bob.
John, good to be here, and particularly tonight. You know, this is our 10th anniversary.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
And Dana Wolf has been the executive producer for that entire period.
Wow, where is she?
So, and it is debate indeed number 124.
I've been told, so I've been told. Sometimes what we say in the beginning is, why now with our debate? Why do we pick this topic now? That's less of a question.
I think so.
So, but take it on, why now?
Well, I mean, it's really kind of amazing that Hillary Clinton has handed us the line for today's debate by describing the Trump voters as
deplorables.
Deplorables. I was going to say despicables, but anyway, and characterizing them as racist and sexist and xenophobic and you know, all manner of hostile adjectives. And so it sort of raises the question, are the elites responsible for this phenomenon, or are the voters responsible?
Did you personally see Trump's success coming if we go back to last year?
You know, actually I did. I would consider myself a member of a Republican elite, and I was quite early among people that I knew in seeing him as a very serious phenomenon. I felt he was a natural sort of star of reality television, and his program was interesting because the punchline is you're fired. So he's holding somebody accountable for a screw up, and most people feel like government needs more accountability and more people fired for screwing up. So that's struck me as quite interesting. The other thing is he had a kind of an aura of authenticity. Maybe not truth-telling exactly, but you had the idea that what you saw was what you get, and that's not something you feel about most politicians. And the final point that struck me about him is he was kind of like, I guess I'd say the poor man's rich man. He was sort of the kind of he was spending money in ways that I think people who are driving taxis or blue-collar people might imagine themselves spending money if they had a couple of $1 billion. And whereas most people who actually do have a couple of $1 billion spend their money in ways that tend to alienate them from most ordinary working people.
You would know something about that?
I know a little bit about it.
Okay. So we're using the word blame. It's pejorative, sort of making an assumption built in that the Trump phenomenon is a good thing or a bad thing. But what do we really mean by that?
Well, I think blame is maybe an unfortunate term in the resolution. What we're really trying to do is explain what the Trump phenomenon is about, and to try to see whether it's more a function of the elite's failure to respond to the real needs and real issues of working class Americans, or whether the groups that are putting Trump forward do indeed represent a defect in our system of folks, of an electorate that simply isn't as informed and thoughtful as it ought to be.
So it's easier to blame the elites on a poster than blame the voters on a poster, in a sense.
Well, one of our, the original language was blame the voters, and then we changed it.
We changed it. And now you know why we're here. Thanks very much, Bob Rosencrantz, and let's please welcome our debaters to the stage. Who laughed when Donald Trump set out to win the White House? Lots of people. But who got the last laugh and the Republican nomination? And who got it? In part by bashing those who had laughed at him, dismissing them as elites who had rigged the system against the little guy. The academic elite, the media elite, the Wall Street elite, the Washington elite. And by proving wrong all of those who laughed at him, did Donald Trump merely prove that populism works, or did he expose something about his list of elitist targets, that in fact they had missed something important going on in America, and by doing so had left an opening in campaign 2016 that this builder of skyscrapers drove through like a bulldozer? Well, that sounds like the makings of a debate, so let's have it. Yes or no to this statement: blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. A debate from Intelligence Squared US. I'm John Donovan. We are at the Kaufman Music Center in New York City. We have 4 superbly qualified debaters who will argue 2 against 2, for and against the motion, blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. As always, our debate goes in 3 rounds, and then the audience votes to choose the winner, and only one side wins. We are going to have you vote right now. Your opinion as you come in off the street. If you'll go to the keypads at your seat. Again, the motion is blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. If you agree with this motion at this point, press number 1. If you disagree, press number 2. And if you're undecided, number 3. You can ignore the other keys. They are not live or relevant. Our motion is blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. The team arguing for the motion, please welcome first Tim Carney. Tim, welcome to Intelligence Squared.
Thank you.
You are, Tim, a senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner. You are a visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And in the column that you write for the Examiner, you noted a recent poll showing that young Washington insiders nevertheless feel not so attached to their political parties anymore. So does this mean, in your opinion, that we're going to be seeing more outsider candidates getting successful in the future?
Well, this is the question every politician and business is asking today, right? How do we appeal to the millennials? I think the answer probably has something to do with participation trophies or something along those lines. But the fact is that you will see more third-party candidates, I think, like Gary Johnson. But so far in this election of all elections, where you'd think they'd do really well, the polls aren't showing it yet. So maybe the 2 parties still have a grasp on it.
All right, and please tell us who your partner is, Tim.
And my partner is Ben Domenech.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Domenech. Ben, welcome, another first-time debater with us.
Good to be with you.
And you are founder and publisher of The Federalist. That is an online magazine focusing on politics and policy and culture. And it actually welcomes different points of view. For example, 2 points of view on Trump. You had one headline that said, Donald Trump can't make America great again because that would require greatness. But you also had one that said, 7 reasons this black man supports Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. So, sounding kind of across the board, but does the magazine take an official position on his candidacy?
As a personal matter, I signed on to the National Review Against Trump cover, but as a publication, we welcome views from all across the political spectrum. And just to suggest to Tim, I think that the answer to your question about appealing to millennials just involves Harambe in some way or another.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the team arguing for the motion. Now let's meet the team arguing against. There are 2 on that side as well. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jennifer Rubin. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
You
Nice to be here.
are you are author of the Right Turn blog at the Washington Post, and you recently came up with a list of questions that you think debate moderators should be asking Trump. They're serious questions, but what, in your opinion, is the most important question to put to candidate Trump in a debate?
Well, when I thought about this question, I wasn't quite sure. And then sure enough, today and yesterday, I got confirmation. And that is to ask Mr. Trump if he still believes that the President of the United States was not born here. That, after all, goes directly to what we need to know about his perspective, his character, but also about his supporters, and whether they are actively supporting someone who embraces a racist, scurrilous lie about our first African-American president. So I think that's where I'd begin.
Okay, interesting filter on it. And can you tell us, please, Jennifer, who is your partner?
My partner from the Wall Street Journal, Bret Stephens.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bret Stephens. Bret, welcome back to Intelligence Squared US. You've been on our stage before. You are a foreign affairs columnist for the Wall Street Journal and deputy editorial page editor, a member of the editorial board. Now, back in August, the board published an editorial that said if the GOP can't get Mr. Trump to change his act by Labor Day, the GOP will have no choice but to write off the nominee as hopeless. So Labor Day is long past. Is it hopeless?
Well, hopeless in the sense that he can't win. I think I'd rate his chances at about 20%. Hopeless in the sense that he isn't going to change or learn or improve as a human being and as a leader, more so than ever.
Ladies and gentlemen, the team arguing against the motion. Now, this is a debate. It's a contest. It's a contest of fact and logic and wit and persuasion. These debaters are trying to get you to vote for their side. I want to point out that we've already had you vote your opinion on this motion when you came in off the street, blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. After you've heard the arguments, we will have you vote a second time. And what we do is we look at the difference between the two votes, and it's the team whose numbers have moved up the most in percentage points who will be declared our winner. So it is the difference between the first and the second vote that determines victory in an Intelligence Squared US debate. Our motion is blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. We go in 3 rounds. Let's begin with round 1, opening statements from each debater in turn. They will be 6 minutes each. And here to speak first, and Ben, you can make your way to the lectern. Speaking first in support of the motion, blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon, Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist and host of the Federalist Radio Hour and media fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ben Domenech.
Thank you, John. So why does the Republican Party choose to nominate Donald Trump? A man who, as John Mulaney tells us, begins every day by asking himself, what would a cartoon rich person do? The key to understanding the Donald Trump phenomenon is to recognize that he is neither a disease nor a symptom. He is a beta test for a cure. Americans are turning to him because he represents the breakdown of the post-Cold War left-right politics of the nation, a breakdown that has been happening in slow motion for the past 2 decades, fueled by a dramatic decline of trust in America's elites. The percentage of Americans today with a great deal of trust in the presidency, the courts, the public schools, and the banks are in the teens. Trust for unions, the justice system, big business, Congress, and the media are in single digits. This decline didn't happen overnight. It began with Watergate in Vietnam and continued through the financial crisis and the Iraq War. Real failures undermined confidence in the capacity of elite institutions to do good and in their capability to represent the interests of the people. Now working and middle-class Americans are reasserting themselves against a bipartisan political and cultural establishment utterly discredited due to their record of failure. The list is familiar to you all by now. 9/11, Iraq, Katrina, congressional corruption, financial meltdown, bank bailouts, failed stimulus, a healthcare mess, stagnant wages, rising distrust, diminished hopes. 16 years of bipartisan failures by Republicans and Democrats alike to live up to what the people wanted. This distrust was earned. Through it all, the elites were looking out for the interests of people other than those they were elected to serve. It's no accident that Donald Trump broke with the Republican Party's orthodoxies on the issues of immigration, trade, and foreign policy, because those are the bipartisan elite consensus views favored by the donor class, by big business, and by party leadership to the exclusion of others. Rather than responding to the populist tendencies that we all saw rising up from this electorate with real changes, the elites overpromised and underdelivered. They thought they could get by holding a musket over their head in election years and prioritizing what lobbyists want in all other years. They were comfortable in a bubble of economic success, a world away from the areas that never saw any recovery. Elite indifference to populist opinion and the economic pain many Americans continue to experience created a vacuum that Donald Trump was happy to fill. A number of smart commentators on the right and the left have delved into the question of America's lost greatness, and they've discovered what would lead voters to find Donald Trump's message so appealing. It's the same phenomenon identified by Chris Hayes on the left in Twilight of the Elites, and on the right by Charles Murray and Yuval Levin in Coming Apart and The Fractured Republic. It's a dramatic failure of the institutions run by America's elites and nostalgia for a time when such mediating institutions could be trusted. Imagine you are one of the millions of middle-aged, unemployed white Americans with a high school degree. There are today 7 million men in prime working age who have dropped out of the labor force. That's 15%. That's higher than since the end of the Great Depression. There are millions more who know people personally experiencing this kind of pain, as a brother, as an uncle, as a son. Moved from unemployment to disability, you'll receive sufficient benefits to subsist, around $1,200 a month, which is enough to pay for the alcohol and the drugs that help you self-medicate. Your life is essentially one marked by hopelessness, desperation, and anxiety. You are statistically unlikely to ever re-enter the workforce, and alone among all demographics, the likelihood of suicide is rising for you. The things that make life not only endurable but happy are religious faith, now lost to you, family, which is fractured, community, which is disintegrated, and work, which you find hard to come by. The TV screen flickers with images of people living lives you could never hope to emulate. Your situation is bleak, and while our soma today is better, it is still not a replacement for the pursuit of happiness. Your tomorrows look dark, but the past, even the grimy parts of it, look like gold. And when a golden-haired man comes on TV, a man who represents a vision of what you might hope your life could be like, a man who is a traitor to his class, who defies the elites, who is rich and successful, who comes from the world of the elites but is strong enough to reject them and their lies, and he tells you it's not your fault. It's not your fault that your life is the way it is. He tells you it's the fault of immigrants and bad trade deals and wasteful, pointless wars based on lies. He tells you the problem with the elites is not that they are too conservative or that they are too liberal, but that they are stupid and don't care about you. He tells you with confidence that he alone can make everything great again. And you listen. In the absence of the failures of the elites, could Donald Trump succeed? The answer is no. Our elite leadership class sowed the wind, and Donald Trump is the whirlwind they've reaped. Vote for the motion.
Thank you, Ben Domenech. And that motion is blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. Here to make his opening statement against the motion, Bret Stephens. He is foreign affairs columnist and deputy editorial page editor at the Wall Street Journal, where he is also a member of the editorial board. Ladies and gentlemen, Bret Stephens.
I want to begin my opening remarks by asking you in the audience a few questions. First question, how many of you in this audience have been to Europe in the last 5 years? Raise your hands. Okay. How many people in this audience live in Manhattan, or let's just say New York City, or a New York City-like suburb like Westchester? Raise your hands. Okay, thank you. How many people in this audience have graduate degrees? Once again, I would say most hands went up, right? One more question, I'm very curious. Generally speaking, Sancerre is white or red wine? White. White seems to be the consensus. You are correct. Thank you very much. Why am I asking these questions? It's very simple. I hate to break it to you, but you are the elite. You live in the most expensive city in America. You travel voluntarily across the ocean to look at paintings you could find on Google. You drink wine that never costs less than $20 a bottle. You're the elite. And so this proposition is very simple. Do you blame yourselves for the rise of Donald Trump? Now, my friends on the opposite side would like to imagine the elite as someone else, all right? It's the billionaire class that you sometimes hear about. It's those corrupt politicians, Democrats or Republicans in Washington. It's some idea of an elite, and yet it's you. And so here's the question that we have to confront tonight, and it's an important question, and it's going to be a very telling question, I think, psychologically speaking. Do you indict yourselves tonight for the rise of Donald Trump? Are you yourself to blame for this immigrant bashing, for this American firsting, for this Putin man-crushing, for this woman-hating, for this charity shortchanging, for this genitalia boasting, for this Chapter 11 indulging, for this Mussolini admiring disgrace of a Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States? That is the question. Now, what you just heard from Ben was an astonishingly condescending portrait of who the Trump voter is. And you're going to hear from my friend Jennifer about just a few more specifics about who that is. Not the guy nodding off in a heroin-induced coma because he's been thrown out of his job, okay? There are, I am sure, even in this highly elite audience that just cheered wildly when I offered a fairly precise description of this joke of a candidate, there are probably some Trump supporters in this audience. Let me ask those Trump supporters, don't raise your hands because I don't want to put you in jeopardy, okay? Did you recognize yourself in that caricature? Are you going to walk out of here and go to the bathroom and shoot up just after this? I don't think so. We live in a democracy, and people think democracy is about freedom. It's not. It's about accountability. It's about we, the people, being responsible for the choices we make in our lives and at the voting booth. Who do you blame for the Trump phenomenon? Well, Bob Rosenkranz, I think, put it well. He blames, or one could blame, the Trump voter. One could blame the people who are responding to this message of intolerance, bigotry, and fake victimization. They're the ones who are primarily accountable. If you want to find another culprit, I would offer you the parade of demagogues who have emerged in the ether on certain cable news shows, on certain radio shows. Some of them have first names that are like Sean, for example, or Rush, for example. I'm not mentioning last names. There are lots of Seans and Rushes out there. And this is a pattern that in history we know very well. It is the pattern of the demagogue demagoguing to a public or to a part of the public that wants easy answers and people to blame. They are accountable for those choices. Do not feel guilty for standing apart from them, and do not condescend to them by saying that they have no moral agency, no personal agency in the disastrous political choice they may be about to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Bret Stephens. And a reminder of what's going on. We are halfway through the opening round of this Intelligence Squared U.S. debate. I'm John Donvan. We have 4 debaters, 2 teams of 2, fighting it out over this motion: blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. You have heard the first 2 debaters. And now on to the third. Debating for the motion, Blame the Elites for the Trump Phenomenon, Tim Carney. He is a senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner and visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Carney.
Thank you. And not to talk outside of school, but Jen Rubin did say on stage before this all began that any one of us would do better than Donald Trump on the debate stage. And I think that Bret Stephens just recently showed that his debating and sophistry skills far exceed Donald Trump's. The argument, if we're going to take it seriously, is that this audience, which means my mom, a retired stay-at-home mom, and the almost out-of-work actor I met in the reception back there, that they are the elites, but that Sean Hannity is not. He's trying to exculpate Sean Hannity and or trying to say Sean Hannity is to blame and is not part of the elites, and this crowd is. I think we need to get more specific. I think we need to define who the elites are that we're talking about, and I'm happy to name very specific names. They are the men and women, mostly the men, who were in charge over the past decades, who led our country to the point it is now. They are George W. Bush. They are Mitt Romney. These are the people who were elected, nominated officials, put in charge of the public good. They're Mitch McConnell and John Boehner and their predecessors. And it's telling to talk about their predecessors. Tom DeLay, who invited lobbyist Jack Abramoff into not just the Republican Party, but into make Washington, D.C. be a favor factory for the well-connected. Bill Frist, the Senate Majority Leader, who now runs Frist Capital that invests in healthcare companies, so he lobbies for Obamacare that enriches the hospitals he's investing in while driving up the prices and taking away the options for everybody else. Former Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, also an Obamacare lobbyist, living very well by lobbying to take away the lobbying for drug companies that want to keep generics off the market. Eric Cantor, supposedly representing Virginia's 7th District as a House Majority Leader, really representing Wall Street. Eric, are you here tonight? Because he retired to a job here. These men enrich themselves while supposedly in the public trust. Currently, 5 of the 6 richest counties in America are within commuting distance of the U.S. Capitol. That is not the sign of a healthy republic. That is a sign of insiders who rigged a game in their favor, so they are extracting wealth from the rest of the society. This is the Hunger Games, ladies and gentlemen. Again, 5 of the 6 richest counties in America are within commuting distance. And that's why you got a Tea Party. That's why 2009, 2010. This wasn't a pro-Republican uprising simply, or, a fix-the-debt uprising simply. It was a populist uprising. It was anger at bailouts. It was anger at a stimulus that was just handouts to the Chamber of Commerce. It was anger at an Obamacare that was just handouts for the drug companies and the hospitals. And Republican leaders, these elites, the men and women in power, gave lip service. Democratic leaders did too. And then what did they do? They squelched that populist uprising. In public, they would say, yes, we need to get rid of crony capitalism, and then they would go behind closed doors with the crony capitalist donors and say, well, yes, that bottom 47%, well, they just won't take responsibility for their lives. That was Mitt Romney's description. If you were in the bottom 47%, it is literally your fault, and you don't belong in the Republican Party. You may not join our country club. That was the message from the Republican elites. And after they lost, they issued an autopsy, as they called it. Item number 1 was, well, we need more low-skilled immigrants in. A laser-guided program aimed at lowering the wages of the low-skilled. So populism rose. The party elites tried to quench it. They rigged the system. They enriched themselves. That's a systematic problem Ben and I have laid out. That's the system that they rigged. But I want to conclude with a very specific way, immediate way, in which the elites bear the blame. On that stage last year was Jeb Bush, backed by $100 million of donor money. He was a man in the arena. He was literally the man on the stage, and he failed to rise to the occasion. He was the one who could have beaten Donald Trump. Whom do we blame for Donald Trump being the nominee? The people who could have beaten them. Jeb Bush was number 1. Chris Christie, probably the pick of a lot of you here. He disappointed me as well. He didn't rise to the occasion. He thought more important than attacking Donald Trump was attacking Marco Rubio. And then when Christie lost, he scampered over to become the valet for Donald Trump. There's that saying of no man is, no matter how great, is thought great by his valet. I think the only exception is Trump and Christie. The backup of the elites was Marco Rubio. And he couldn't rise to the occasion either. He proved unable to move beyond his canned lines. And what did most of the elites do when it boiled down? When they had an alternative, when they had Ted Cruz, who may not be the favorite of here, but is somebody other than Donald Trump. And remember, question on the table is, whom do we blame for Donald Trump? Well, we know what Christie did. House Speaker John Boehner in the spring during the debate called Ted Cruz Lucifer in the flesh, literally. And he called Donald Trump his buddy. Bob Dole, the majority leader turned lobbyist, said of Trump, he's got the right personality. He's kind of a deal maker. You had mayor turned presidential candidate turned lobbyist Rudy Giuliani said, if it came down to Trump or Cruz, quote, there is no question I'd vote for Trump. Majority leader turned lobbyist Trent Lott told a reporter that he'd take Trump over Cruz if he had to choose. And then, of course, there was Hillary. She's the nominee. Any normal, decent candidate would be mopping the floor with this thrice-married, philandering, con man, liberal candidate trying to run as a Republican. She can't do it. Why not? Because she chooses opacity at all occasions. That the deplorable public doesn't deserve to know her business. These are the elites. These were the people who set the stage for Trump. These were the people who could have beaten Trump, who could have made him run away. They all failed. It's clear that we need to blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon.
Thank you, Tim Carney. And that is the motion, blame the elites for the Trump phenomenon. And here making her opening statement against the motion, Jennifer Rubin, who covers domestic and foreign policy issues in the Right Turn blog for the Washington Post. Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Rubin.
Like Donald Trump himself, our distinguished opponents suffer from a lack of factual support for their motion. They paint a picture, not unlike Donald Trump does, of a dystopia, of heroin addicts, of despair, of poverty, of people sold short. Now, none of us should minimize the suffering, the social and economic dislocation that occurred in the wake of the 2008 crash. But let's get real here. Let's not play in Donald Trump's made-up America. Just today, it comes out that 2015, we had record income growth in America, 5.2%. It comes out that, in fact, poverty is on the decline. It comes out that home ownership is rising. And this wasteland of manufacturing, that doesn't exist either. In fact, we've picked up about 900,000 manufacturing jobs in recent years, and we have a record high number of open manufacturing jobs. So if any of your children would like to forego an expensive elite college and instead become workers in manufacturing firms, I would strongly encourage them to do so. It's bizarre, frankly, that we should concoct an economic argument that not only does not exist, but that is contrary to just about every conservative economic principle. Conservatives, you see, do not believe that immigration causes unemployment. That's a zero-sum thinking that we usually attribute to our friends on the left. It's factually not true, and philosophically it's abhorrent to conservatives who do not believe that if I win, you lose. Conservatives do not believe that millions of jobs were lost because of free trade. That's nonsense. We know that there has been a shuffling of the workforce. We know that a more automized, more sophisticated workplace requires different skills, but we have not lost millions and millions of jobs to Mexico. China did not steal our jobs. This is the sort of economic fallacy that Donald Trump peddles. It's also a little bit bizarre, as my esteemed colleagues were talking, to think that Bob Dole, who's about as elitist as possible,